Good evening and welcome to the June 22nd edition of Sex Addiction in the News. My name is Stacy Sprout. I am a licensed therapist, certified sex addiction therapist, and author of my own story called Naked in Public, a memoir of recovery from sex addiction and other temporary insanities. And I am here with a lovely couple, as you can see, James and Sharon, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves in more detail, but I want to tell you a little bit about how I met and how I have this wonderful opportunity to talk with them tonight and share some of what they have to share with you. So, as you know, I am passionate about destigmatizing the message about sex addiction, and under all addiction, there's typically something going on. Some are different than others. As past guest Gary Wilson talked about the conditioning addiction that can come from pornography. But much of what we see in addictions therapy has to do with intimacy disorder. And there are facets of the work that we do, but I want to destigmatize the conversation about all of it so that people who are afflicted can get help now. So I met James through an email listserv that I am on for professionals. And he had been answering a colleague about a question of steroid addiction. And in the email, he disclosed that he had had a steroid addiction himself. And he was so clear, and he was so kind and helpful, and there was so much awesome information. I thought, wow, this guy is amazing. And I actually I was thinking about him to be on the show, and I think I had already even asked, is that true, James? I had already asked if you would consider being on my show. Yeah, and so that happened. And then when I was creating the show, I was looking for guests. One of the people that was on my newsletter, so I have a newsletter, and there's many people who are on that list, and I send out updates about things. And I said, hey, everybody, can you think of anyone cool for me to have on the show? Well, Galen was a newsletter subscriber, and she said, there's this awesome couple that you have to have on your show. And so I thought, wow, a couple, that would be so fantastic. And so she gave me their names, and turns out James was a member of the couple. So I had already asked him to be on the show. And then she said, what about James and Sharon? So I hadn't known Sharon, but then it became going from just one person on the show to a couple. And I asked them, and they said yes. And so I am privileged and honored to introduce to you Sharon Rinearson and James. And I would like you to introduce yourself in more depth.
I think you should go first.
Oh, okay. I get to go first.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, Stacy. It's just awesome to be here, and such a privilege. Thank you. So Sharon and I will share our story in a little bit. But we run a center in West Palm Beach, Florida, where we offer intensives for partners, for couples, and for addicts, sex addicts, and compulsive sexual behavior. So we are both on the board of APSATS, which is the Association of Partners of Sex Addicts Trauma Specialists. And we are, well, I'm trained, I'm hoping my certification comes in the next day or two. And Sharon is a certified clinical partner specialist. I am also a CSAT, certified sex addiction therapist supervisor. And we're both certified trauma specialists, professionals. So that's kind of, go ahead.
And I'm an LCSW, which
Right.
is better than your,
LMHC.
right.
I agree. I have that too.
So we can supervise anybody, right? And
Right.
can you
I
supervise?
can supervise mental health counselors. That's it. Yeah.
But
You have to storm the lobby.
that's awesome, Sharon. But I'm not a CSAT supervisor, so I have to admit that his credential is better than mine. But we're all doing the best we can here. What?
Right, just
that
that
one.
one.
Just we'll give credit where credit's due. Okay. Well, it's funny because I introduced you first as a recovering couple, and then you're filling me in on all your awesome credentials. So you're a licensed therapist, you've gone on to get advanced training, you become specialists and experts in the facets of the field, working with partners who are traumatized, working with sex addicts. And I guess I'm biased toward, sometimes I am biased toward people who have been down that road when they're helping others, that there can be just a certain felt experience that is really powerful. And I don't mean to discount people who don't call themselves addicts or in recovery from, addictive families or life process at all, but it's just fun for me to get to interview you who are experts in the field and are experts in your own recovery. So we'll get more to that, but I did want to ask you about your work, because you do intensives with couples who are trying to heal after sex addiction, betrayal, trauma. And there's a lot of people that don't know what an intensive is. They don't know how they work. And I was wondering if you would share more about what that is.
So an intensive for us, we have the ability to work with the referring therapist, if there is one, and we will create a custom intensive for a partner, for an addict, for a couple, or for a family. Mm-hmm. And we will meet the clients where they are. So there's nothing canned here. We don't have the same curriculum week in and week out. We really, anytime we try to have a schedule, we end up following the clients down this rabbit hole, and we have learned at this point that if we have a schedule, we're really, really going to get off track. So we try not to have a schedule. What we do want is to welcome people here so that they feel like that they have come home, and that we are just like them. We might have a little more education. We might have a little more in this specific topic. We might have a little more experience, but it becomes a we process. So it goes from a me, a partner in isolation, an addict in isolation, to a we process. And it's not just the two of them, it's the four of us. And Galen, 5.
So Galen just joined us not too long ago, and she has been a fantastic addition to.
I am addicted.
I am too.
I'm really addicted to Galen.
You love her.
She's just fantastic, and our clients have benefited so much from her presence here.
So an intensive can last 5 days. That's really the minimum that we like. We feel like that people need a chance to come and get comfortable, and for us to ease them in until we see that they're ready for that really hard work. People don't come to us if they're not ready to work. I keep saying that there needs to be a disclaimer on our website that says, don't come here if you don't want to hear the truth. Because we really feel that life is short, and our life together was too valuable for us to waste another minute, and we don't want anybody else to waste another minute of their life either. So they come from 10 to 6 for 5 straight days.
Actually, we're with a partner right now who is here for 12 straight days. 12
straight days.
So, the length can vary depending upon the need and desire of the client or clients coming in. And I did want to add that when we work with families, Sharon has 25 years of stuff. Sorry, you're not.
What? 25 years of what? I didn't catch that.
25 years of specialized work with children as well. So we will work with children from ages 3 up.
Wow.
Children of clients that we are working with
Right.
that have been affected by sex addiction.
Wow, that's amazing. And so I imagine you've worked with a range of ages, little ones and pre-adolescent. Yeah, teenagers, 18, 20s, parents with, yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow, I bet you have great resources.
But they come with their parents.
Yeah. Yeah, family treatment.
So it's a family. So it's a family intensive.
Mm-hmm. So all children are affected by this. You know, there's no way to avoid it. There's no way to avoid the conflict in the household, the distancing, the isolation, and so they feel it. The missed opportunities, yeah. So they feel it, and they're taking it in, and kids are like sponges, and their children are gods, or their parents, are gods to them. So, it can create significant trauma that then they're going to need people like us later in life. So hopefully we can help families avoid that
sooner
and
learn how to be close.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question about that. It's getting really bright in here. How do you see typically when families come in for an intensive, does it seem like the kids have been told too much information or not enough, or does it just depend?
Typically it's one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of, we feel like we do a lot of cleanup from extreme answers. And what we try to teach is that there is age appropriate information, and you really answer questions that are asked.
Okay. So
children will make up stories, just as we all do, about what's really happening. And one of the things that we know about, especially partner work, is that if you're not told the truth, whatever you're making up in your head can be so much worse.
Yeah, I can appreciate the struggle as a parent trying to cope with what it means to deal with the things that they're either admitting to themselves or admitting to their partner, or the partner is finding out, wanting to navigate some way through it and not wanting to share anything with the child, or kind of everything coming tumbling out, or there being discoveries. And so I just appreciate the family treatment to try to address who's in the family, where are they developmentally, what's appropriate to share based on that, or if things have been overshared, helping them deal with emotions they might have about that, or even trauma or intrusive thoughts about that. And I can see where the family services would be so helpful for so many people.
We get a lot of questions from couples who have fairly young children, and so we like to use the phrase broken promises.
There's been broken promises in the family, and yeah. So let's see. Tell me a little bit about how it works in an intensive. Like, people come, they're coming for 5 days minimum, 10 to 6 a.m. What do they do all day?
Well, we really just let them sit back there on the couch.
They just rest. Really, they just need rest. And
they do. It's all about rest.
And what do you do? You also rest with them.
Yes. See, we have blankets and pillows.
Yeah, looks cozy.
And we have lots of toys. So what do? We do assessments before they come, so that we really know everything that we can possibly know before they get here. Mm-hmm. We work on 5 different timelines at the same time, creating a visual impact on whiteboards. We're a little whiteboard addicted, around here.
So,
We have really big ones that roll around, and we can take them from room to room.
and we keep buying more. We don't like to erase them.
So we start with a negative experience timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So birth to now, a positive experience timeline.
Mm-hmm.
We do a spiritual timeline,
Mm-hmm.
a sexual timeline, and a substance timeline.
Wow. And I can see, I mean, I could just see the overlap, but also the distinct, if our brains are built by association. So I start thinking of this, and then I remember this, and I remember this, all in the vein of spirituality. If someone just said, give me a timeline of everything that happened in your life or something, how could you possibly mine from all of those sources? But I can also see where it would be huge. Like how would it all fit?
It's huge. We write really small. James is a great small writer. We call him the scribe.
Okay.
And
that's my only job here.
Okay. So she rests and you scribe.
That's right.
Right.
So that work leads us wherever it is we need to go. We keep people safe. We nurture them and love them. Once they're part of our family, they are always a part of us. And we have clients who we won't hear from for a long time, and then we might get a Christmas card, or we might get a telephone call and say, hey, can you help us with this situation? We need to talk it out. We work from our hearts.
Yeah.
We also use, because emotional issues are really resolved in the brain, on the right side of the brain, we use a lot of experiential work. So there's always some psychoed, of course. There has to be, but a lot of what we do is experiential. So by that, we mean play therapy for adults. We mean sand tray therapy, art therapy. Now I've started back in. For a few years, I was the clinical director at a adventure therapy substance abuse treatment center.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've just started doing that again, bringing it into our practice. So that currently will include field trips, hiking, paddle boarding, and
today you rode a horse through the office.
that was a donkey.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Fit through the door.
Today I actually took a client up to our local marine life center where they save and rehab turtles. And so I had that client identify with one of the turtles and tell me why. And that particular turtle had been trapped in a canal and had grown all kinds of terrible infections and barnacles, etc., on its shell, and it could no longer it was almost on the verge of death. So he was really able to relate that to his life and where he is now.
Wow.
So it was really powerful.
Yeah, I can see where that would be powerful.
So we have Play-Doh, Stacy, just so you know what we're doing with our hands.
Well, I was wondering, so what you do with play therapy, you play Play-Doh, you do sand tray, you do art therapy, you're really engaging, kind of whole-brained and some of that playful, and it sounds like fun, but I know it can't be all fun if it's, if he's identifying with that turtle, it's a fun field trip, but that's also very poignant in terms of expressing his own, having been near death or, so I imagine that there's a lot of powerful things that are elicited through that.
He actually groaned when I asked him to do that, to find a turtle that he identified with. And he actually went through a few, and he's not big on rules. So those that had to be monitored daily right now, he said, no, not that one. So he groaned, and I said, well, I had to do something therapeutic here, right? And he just laughed, and we got on with it. And he was really, it really settles people as well to see these beautiful, majestic animals that are having their lives saved. They do amazing work.
It's going to make you cry.
It is going to make me cry because I love what they do. And, he said, "Why are we going into the store?" And I said, "Because I like to support this charity. It's my favorite." So he wouldn't let me buy him anything though. So there you go.
So we do a lot of psychoeducational. We do a lot of, today I had a client write with her non-dominant hand instructions and care for her own little self. And then there's some drawings that go with that she'll find out about tomorrow.
I hear you engaging a lot, the inner child or the inner innocence. And I can appreciate, addicts are pretty tough. Partners who've been betrayed, they may have to be, we talked about that, the soldier, but tapping into the innocence of individuals and helping them to make that okay, that we can all have that innocence and vulnerability. And even just then, James, with you talking about your client tearing up, just that heart connection, like you were saying, that makes such a difference in people feeling safe, I think, is feeling like the therapist is a human too, has a heart and cares for them and has, a human approach. I make up that you draw from your own experience as a recovering couple in that way. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your own journey of what that looked like, kind of from before you had any idea there was an addictive process going on, and what happened, and how you've turned that into something of use to support others. I know that's a big question, but
we've got it. You want me to start? Okay. So we like to look at these addictions. We like to sort of lump them into these words called me addictions, right? And so when I met James, one of the things that attracted me to him was that he was so much bigger than I was. That little girl in me that wanted to be protected by this big, powerful man. And this is a prop that we use a lot when we talk about this. Here, you do that because you're better at that. So it's a little tiny Tinkerbell and Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh, it looks like you, James.
Exactly, right?
Oh, holding little Tinkerbell in his arms. Aw.
Yeah. So I was looking for this knight in shining armor. I was a divorced single, well, not a single mom because they still had their dad. But I was divorced, raising two young boys. I had some physical issues that were pretty traumatic, and James came riding in on his big white horse to save me.
I might say that the horse was spaybind and my armor was very rusty.
Your horse was an old Mitsubishi, I think.
It was,
Yeah.
Yes, very old.
But I mean, I appreciate the power of fantasy. I just the longing, and of course we're conditioned, many of us, in Western culture and Disney, and that's the fantasy that is often portrayed, or at least was when I was a little girl. Someday my prince will come. So you had that, and you were coming from a place of some pain if you had physical things going on. And so he seemed physically strong while you were struggling. And then what happened?
Well, I presented everything that Sharon could want. So I sold myself as my best self. So
he knew better what I wanted than I did.
And I made the promise that I could provide all of that for Sharon. And the fact was that I had no idea how to back that up. What I was really looking for was somebody who would nurture me, who would need me, who would validate me, who would give me a sense of power and control, which I didn't feel over my life, even though at that time I had no idea about that. And Sharon is the most amazing nurturer I've ever met. And so I wanted that. And so, and this is me obviously having done a lot of work and looking back, not knowing that at the time.
Yeah.
And so, she basically became for me my fuel. And as much as I thought that I really loved her, what I really loved was what she brought to the table. And I sold her on the things that she needed. I was able to recognize, sorry, I keep seeing little whiskers all over the place. I'm having to fix them.
You sold me trust. You
Right.
sold that you were trustworthy.
I sold that I was trustworthy. I couldn't even trust myself, not even close at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I looked like I had my act together. Physically, I presented large and powerful, and I came off as really calm when I was really raging inside.
And kind and generous and helpful and loving and giving.
All the things I am now.
All the things you are now. So he was presenting his best self. He was presenting to me the man that he wanted to be.
And a lot of me believed that that was who I really was, but then I also had absolutely terrible self-esteem, terrible self-worth. So I knew inside to some extent, this is not a promise I can follow through on. But I needed what I needed so badly that I made the promise anyway, because there's no way that Sharon would want to be with me if she knew who I was.
That's what you believed inside? Yeah.
So here I am presenting, let me lower that, presenting sort of at the 12 o'clock with my best me, right? But it took the last 7 years for me to go around, all the way around the clock. In other words, the journey, right? Oh, I'm going the wrong way now. The journey that it takes to get from the head to the heart and realize who we truly are. And I would say that I am not yet here. I am in many respects, but I'm really, wrong way again, sorry, somewhere around here. It's really hard because we're backwards on the screen.
Yeah, you're doing great.
I've still got a lot of learning to do. So when I got into a 12-step program, there really wasn't a Steroids Anonymous. So I got into another 12-step program and worked extraordinarily hard. Had a fantastic sponsor, fully committed, and they fully committed for me. Because when this came to a head, I really was literally in such self-hatred that I had no choice for me, I had no choice but to change. And whether that meant that our marriage would be saved or whether it wasn't, I still had to make that change because I couldn't tolerate the person that I was, which really turned out to be I couldn't tolerate the behaviors that I was engaging in, which included a lot of, emotionally devastating, betraying, destructive. Thank you.
Can we stay with the D's? Let's do some more alliteration here.
Right. So, want to go ahead?
So, what we realized was that James picked me because he thought that I was someone that I wasn't. He picked me because he thought that I was sitting on this pedestal, and you can't keep that secret very long that you're not that person.
So it came out eventually.
Especially when you're married and you have kids, and your true self shows through. And oh my gosh, I wasn't perfect. I was so far from being perfect.
So I'm just curious, when did at that point when you were, Because I could see someone saying, well, everyone shows their best self when they're dating, and that's pretty normal. But then you're talking, James, about the addiction and devastation and can't stand the behavior, and and it was devastating to the relationship. And Sharon, what I'm hearing you say is you got into the relationship and you couldn't keep up. You couldn't stay on the pedestal. You were human. You had struggles. So, I mean, what was there? Was there anything kind of out of the ordinary about that, or did you find out about the addiction first?
So when I could no longer fuel him by myself,
Ah,
then James really turned to wanting to get attention, wanting to get appreciation,
ah,
and used steroids as a way to feed himself
got it.
when I wasn't the pipeline of ego fuel that he thought I was.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
And what we ended up with was I was married to a very angry little boy who wasn't getting his needs met and blamed me.
Got it. Yeah. So that I think of that we talk about the intimacy, the cravings, and then give it back. Like I think you talked about that some. Like she was your fuel, and then she started being human and probably needing stuff back more herself, and maybe having a bad day, and suddenly the allegiance start to shift. I recognize that myself as my love addiction recovery. It's like, give me. And so then did you? I mean, you part of you were attracted to him for his size and his physical strength, but then you must have started to see a different side of that too, I'm guessing.
I did. I became so frustrated because I didn't see any of that man that I married. All I really got was anger and retribution.
So here's part of how I through the years have figured out that it worked. Basically, when you are taking somebody's fuel, you're not just fueling yourself. You're sucking that fuel tank dry, and eventually, when I met Sharon, she was bubbly, alive, just the most, and would giggle at the slightest thing, just delightful. And I wanted that energy because I had no idea how to create that for myself. I was lifelong depressive, and I wanted that in my life. And so once, and I falsely believed that I could develop it, but that wasn't happening. All I was doing,
or that I could be it for you.
Well, that's really what it came down to, was that Sharon would be it for me, because that was, once we got together, I had no impetus to create it for myself because she was right there and she had an abundance of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that I am, or was, certainly not now, but I was what I term a psychic vampire. So I literally sucked all of that beautiful energy out of her until she had nothing more to give and had lost that joy and that everything that I had fallen in love with, right? So I emptied her and left her a husk, and isolated her from her friends, said, I don't really like your friends, let's stay home. And so I was classic in gaslighting Sharon all the time, draining her of all of her energy. Honestly, I might as well have been a vampire who had tied her up and just fed off of her for, at that point, 4 years.
and blaming me for not feeling full.
So, I want to have a quick comment. I so appreciate your candor. And I know you're not talking about a sex addiction, you're talking about steroid, but I also just appreciate that some of our viewers, the process can be so similar. The gaslighting can be even worse when there's affairs and such, but the emotional draining, the energetic draining, and it's very relevant for me because I just gave a talk last weekend at a SLAA retreat here. And one of the key points of my talk was, in my own recovery, learning to tell the difference between transcendent and sacred. And, you know, if someone's a psychic vampire, you might have, at the beginning, you might have real big highs. I mean, to get their drug, they're going to put you on, you know, it just, and so if someone's interested, on my website, I just posted something called Sober Sacred Sex. It's a talk that I gave.
It's really good.
Oh, thanks. Did you listen to it? Well, because I want to name this dynamic that happens. And I James, I so appreciate your honesty about this is what I was. I didn't know how to get anywhere else. So, you know, I had to, and it's just warning people. It's like, gosh, it's kind of scary, but that's what happens. And someone can look like the perfect knight in shining armor, but on the inside, you might eventually find yourself feeling quite drained, or you know, myself, I might be the one doing the draining. And so it's, how can we, you know, so how, yeah, so I have a million questions, but I want to hear more from you, Sharon, because I think you something was starting to come into the picture, maybe as a showing.
So we have this spray that we use around here, and it's psychic vampire spray.
Well, to keep them away?
Yeah, but I didn't have it then.
Okay.
Well, protect from the draining.
What does it smell like? Garlic?
No.
Thank God. That would be awful.
No, it's made by Paper Crane Apothecary. And it is it's a unique and complex blend of, I can't even read it, sonically tuned gem elixirs, black tourmaline, ruby, lapis, onyx,
Wow,
garnet, rosemary oil, juniper, lavender, and Reiki charged crystals.
oh my gosh. Okay.
It really does work.
Wow.
You know, so often when we have new addicts come into the program, I'm running around with this shit like,
Wow.
I did just say shit.
Well, we don't have censorship here on sex addiction in the news. We say swear words sometimes, although you may have been the first, but it's really okay. You're the trailblazer. But I want to acknowledge, like, that there is an energetic component to sex addiction, to other addictions, that I love talking about it, and I don't think we can talk about it enough. And I also want to talk about the recovery from it. Like, obviously that's a huge transformation. You talked about going around the clock, I don't know, again, going around the development wheel. Obviously, you have come to such a different place in your relationship. I can tell by the nonverbal, the ways you look at it, your gaze, the way you're leaning in. There's so much love there. One of the viewers said you can actually buy the vampire spray online and included a link. Okay, so everyone, you now know, thanks to Sex Addiction to the News and James and Sharon, where to get your psychic vampire spray. Okay, don't tell me I never told you anything. They told you. But how on earth did things turn around? And what, I mean, you said, okay, James, you said you had your awakening, you got into 12-step, you got a rock solid sponsor, you started working. Sharon, did you confront him? Was there ultimatums involved? Was it just he was sick and tired, as they say, of being sick and tired, and he started changing? What happened for you as a couple?
We wrecked as a couple.
Yeah.
I remember you leaving and me saying, because I knew better, right? Because I was always right.
You still are always right.
You need to stay because we need to work through this crisis, right? You need to stay. And he couldn't. And what we now know that we did was a therapeutic separation.
Ah, okay.
And so that first year, because I took a look at myself and I saw how brokenhearted I was, but I also was really disappointed in myself. Not through James's eyes, but I was disappointed in myself because I didn't like who I'd become, how I'd changed in order to live with this man-child who took everything from me. So I pulled my big girl panties on, and I had 3 different therapists at the same time. And each, as therapists, we're pretty picky about therapists that we see. I think we're probably really bad clients. And so I had 3 just to make sure I got everything that I needed. And we didn't start couples therapy for a year after that.
Did you feel like you had to grow on your own more?
Well, because I was always right, it was about James, right? His ego's not strong enough to do couples therapy. And there was some truth to that.
I mean, it's beyond true. There was no way, because I was so focused on me. Mm-hmm. There was no, that narcissistic piece, not so much narcissistic personality disorder. Of course, that's really, really severe, but the level of self-centeredness and selfishness that comes from not being in touch with who you are, not really being able to fuel yourself, because then you have to find this fuel everywhere else. And that looks and is like, it is narcissism. It's just not narcissistic personality disorder, but it is narcissism.
Mm-hmm. The traits, yeah.
Well, yeah, but really strong, right?
Sorry. And Stacey, I couldn't trust myself to be around him.
Why not?
Because I loved him.
Oh.
And because I have a lot of empathy, right? And I share that with a lot of our clients, a lot of our female clients. A huge amount of empathy. And then I was a therapist, so I saw his little boy and I understood what was happening. And I've described it almost that I created a hedge of thorns around me. And I made some really hard boundaries. Those boundaries weren't to punish James, but they were to protect me and to teach me to take care of myself, mm-hmm. to not sacrifice myself mm-hmm. for him, mm-hmm. so that I could be a whole person, mm-hmm. so that I could work through all of the trauma that I needed to work through and not give any of my ego away to him. Wow. And he was working his fanny off. How many meetings did you go to?
I started with 90 and 90, and then at the end of 90, my sponsor said, "Congratulations, and what do you think?" And I said, "Well, I'm really glad that's over." Well, one thing to say to that particular sponsor, because he looked at me and he actually giggled, and he said, "Since you answered that way, you can go to another 90. Oh. So I had 180 and 180. And then he deliberately started to cut it back, and we ended up with 311 and 3 out of 365. But what that doesn't count, those are regular meetings. That doesn't count the meetings that I had with him, which sometimes were once or twice a day at the beginning, plus a regular meeting. So it's quite a bit more than that. But that was the level of dedication. My rule was, if I didn't want to go, I had to go. Because that's when I needed it the most.
Mm-hmm. The support, the new ways of thinking, the higher principled living, honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, and Yeah.
And, a lot of addicts are really resistant, especially sex and love addicts. They just, they have considerable terminal uniqueness, and really don't. I'm not like anybody that's in that room. No way. I'm not like that. I can, no. So, I had that same feeling when I was in, and I hated it. But I forced myself to go because I knew that I had spent 40 whatever years not being able to fix my issue. And I don't mean that I was a steroid addict all that time, but what I was an intimacy avoidant. I had an intimacy disorder.
Fantasy disorder.
And a fantasy disorder, or a fantasy addiction. So, and at the base of sex and love addiction is fantasy.
Yeah, we see that a lot in our work.
Trauma, and, this is not including the trauma that develops it. Yeah. But it's a fantasy addiction, the fantasy of the perfect sexual partner, the fantasy of the perfect love partner, for me, the fantasy of the perfect body that I could build, which was really just armor, because I couldn't face how weak I was inside, or my perception of that, which was true too, because I hadn't built my own strength. Yeah. And, I'm now in adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. And that's where I'm doing some more deep trauma work. I also had therapy. Well, I don't know that I had 3. I had 2 therapists, an EMDR therapist and a regular therapist through this time, and I still see my therapist every week for an hour and a half. I go and see her every week. And the night before, I'm in my 12-step. It's actually a yellow book meeting for ACA where we're working the steps. So, and I will say this, that if it's a problem now, I don't avoid anything. I even if I'm scared to death of it, I do it anyway, because I have to, because I love what we have, and I know that if I do my work, this can only get better. And this what we have now is so incredible and so beautiful. And it really is like a phoenix. It was in ashes. It was in absolute ruins. And that's because I just want to be really clear. The steroid addiction, because people are probably thinking, well, how is that? Well, that's a substance. No, steroid addiction is not. It's not about the substance. The substance doesn't get you high. It's the feeling that you're God, that you're worth something. It comes from those same places of being unlovable, unworthy, your body dysmorphia, the eating issues.
Looking for external validation.
Right.
Not having been taught or had the opportunity to practice that internal validation, that resilience that comes from that. Once we found out how to keep ourselves safe, then we knew how to keep each other safe, because we knew how to keep ourselves safe.
And you know what? Even to this day, it's practice. It's that vulnerability, being able to, this is, men are not, as everybody I guess knows, it's pretty simple. Men are not raised to share their emotions. We're raised to crush them, and every man around us says, don't feel, right? I mean, don't cry, don't feel, don't speak it. And the thing is that, the shame is going to stay until we do. And so men have to turn that. That is the hero's journey, is being able to turn that courage on, and instead of always leaning out, always make that choice to lean in and show your love by being vulnerable and by listening and hearing and being present for what your partner has to say, what their emotions are. Even if you have no idea how to respond, for goodness sake, don't try to solve. That's the worst thing you can do. But to listen and hear, and that's the greatest gift that we can give each other, is to hear each other.
Mm. Here's one thing I so love about your story, among many things, is you reached a point of crisis, and then you figured out or got enough help to help you figure out that like for James, the way to be strong was not necessarily to be so physically strong or even, try to put that best self out when it wasn't authentic, but to actually dive into your own recovery, to dive into the discipline of support and challenge and spiritual work, to just look at your own character, to identify those traits of selfishness and those that you talked about. So the true strength of recovery actually came out of your kind of looking at yourself and being willing to do the work. And now the strength that you have is through your vulnerability. It's just like Brene Brown talks about, the listening, the kindness. It's a different kind of strength. It's that empowered masculinity that I see in recovering men. And it's just wonderful. And it's the antidote to how boys are raised. And for you, Sharon, the piece of like the recognition, you were like the opposite of narcissistic traits. You were like so giving and so empathic and in love, and and yet realizing, wait, I have to boundary because I just naturally want to give, and it's not safe at this time. And you looked in the mirror, and maybe you didn't start out that way, but as a result of all of the pain in your relationship, you did not like what you saw, and then you didn't sit around and rest like you let your clients do. You got 3 therapists. I know you don't let your clients rest all the time. And you just started doing your work, and you had some space in your relationship to do that. I mean, that I think for many couples, it feels like the opposite of what they might want to do. And yet it's the most powerful thing. And then look where you are now. You are giggling, you're laughing, you're connected, you are in such a different place because of doing your own work. And I really admire that. And I wore this shirt for you. It says peace on earth. Can't really see it, but because I feel like these recovering couples are transforming the earth. Like it really is bringing that love, something so powerful, and the ripple effects, not only through your work, I'm sure, but through everyone you meet. And no, it's not done. And no, none of us is perfect, but I just see that the power of that love to bring healing and the role modeling. So I admire that. And I thank you for sharing your story. It takes so much courage this is a live interview, and you're answering questions about your character struggles and past mistakes and things you felt ashamed about or you didn't like in yourself. And so much of society is about looking good. I mean, that's kind of the deal. So that's part of why I actually wanted to do this show live. I wanted to be able to make mistakes and have it just be a human or humans talking, because that's how recovery is. It's like, yep, we're just all kind of gristing our way through and making messes and trying to clean them up. And so so we have about
to that.
Please.
So the biggest part of our work now is that we realize that sometimes we become that safety becomes a god. And so the reason why we are what we are is not because we learned how to stay safe. That was part of it. But really, it was using the what is that word I'm looking for? Liminal. The liminal space between moving from pain and chaos to that safe space, and then into the brave space, into the we arena. And that's where we live.
So that whatever we're thinking about, the true sober thinking and sober emotionality for us is always in terms of the we. And that's what we help our clients get to, so that the me is, when they're in the me, they know that's a danger zone. so that they can pull themselves out of that and come into the we. And if I could just add one more thing, you use the term empowered masculinity, which I absolutely love. One of the things that I work with our clients on who are addicts or men, is they're so afraid of losing their masculinity and going towards the feminine principles of emotion, of generosity, of love, of creativity, and that well, where am I going to be? I'm going to lose my identity as a male. And the thing is that it takes so much masculine energy to go toward that we never lose it. And we are engaging it in a way that's going to grow us and create such a beautiful possibility for us. So we have to engage that masculinity just in a way we never thought we would. Mm-hmm. So we don't lose it; it enhances it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I so want that message to get out. Yeah.
And see, that's all you have to do. Just keep on.
Well, and I see the same for Sharon. It's the, I called it empowered womanhood, where sometimes that means you have to set limits. And it's not about empathy and giving. It's about saying no and standing up. And so we're,
embracing some more masculine attributes.
I hated those limits, by the way. Hated them.
Yeah. Oh.
But what it taught me was that, okay, she's kicking me out each time I'm over there because I'm not present. So I really want to be with her. So guess what? I need to get present. I need to learn how to do it. Yeah. And that was my impetus. I had to learn how to do it.
Stacey, we're running around that clock.
I know. We here at Sex Addiction News, we have a little bit of leeway. It's just like with swear words, but I will say that love is an amazing motivator, and I just appreciate that you let that be. You let her be your muse in a positive way, and how happy you look together, and what a payoff. It's just delightful and darling. So before we wrap up, because it's been almost an hour, I remember when we talked before, James, you said that you're writing 2 books, not 1, but 2. And I know that at least for one of them, I remember you have a totally killer title. And so I was wondering if you tell us a little bit about your projects.
So I'm writing 2, one with my right hand, one with my left hand.
At the same time.
They are for
with core pins.
Right.
Product placement.
Right, yeah. Our first adventure with core pens was that they didn't have any information on them to get in touch with us.
Oops.
Oops. Marketing moguls that we are.
I felt like there needed to be more information on emotional or intimacy avoidance out there. Mm-hmm. And there were a few articles, and there's a couple of books on intimacy anorexia, mm-hmm. but I wanted to broaden that because anorexia is a very limiting term. Mm-hmm. It's very deep end on that
kind
spectrum.
Of extreme, yeah.
And so I was trying to put together an outline for a book that really would appeal to both the intimacy avoidant, which is a horrible word, and the partner of that person. And it just wasn't coming together. So I decided on writing 2, 1 for each, so that they would come out in a parallel publication.
Cool.
And that's to help the partner get through and understand what's going on and be able to start to set the boundaries, etc., which an awful lot about.
Me or Stacey?
You and Stacey. She wrote a book. So
oh well, yeah, okay.
You gotta get
I didn't write a book.
So the title for the one for the avoidant is which is inclusive of sex addiction and compulsive sexual behavior. We like to sort of use the catch-all problematic sexual and intimacy behavior. because really what it comes down to is if you're struggling with what you are you an addict? Are you a compulsive? Are you hypersexual? Are you all of those things? At the very basis of it, is it a problem for your partner? Because if it's a problem for either partner, it's problematic behavior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, we can cut through that. So the title for the book for the avoidant is it's not the penis, it's the weenus.
You're making that part up.
My studio.
No, it's for real. No,
My-
it's copyrighted and everything. So no, that's for real.
Wait, so my
I'm
studio.
gonna illustrate it.
Wait, no, don't illustrate it. We have some limits here. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Oh, what a crack up. Oh, that is very memorable. My studio audience is going wild.
Hopefully it'll be more appealing than otherwise.
Oh gosh. Well, so I love it. I love your sense of humor, your sense of play. I love that you're just lightening up what can be such a heavy topic conversation and inviting people in. Oh, here's Sparky. He's joining me. Sparky Sprout, my co-anchor here. So, well, good luck to you on your book. Thank you for talking about the intimacy avoidance. Problematic sexual and intimacy behavior is a very inviting term. I mean, especially for women, they struggle so much with the term sex addict. And, it's like, as has been said on the show before, we don't care what we call it. Let's just call it something that gets people help. So I like that a lot. And so I imagine that title is for the addict typically, or the male. Do you have a title for your second book yet, or is that still?
It's hard to top that one.
I know.
Working title for that is probably intimacy avoidance.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Boring. I'm going to have to work on that one. Otherwise, it's just not fair, right? You're gonna have something that's funny.
Well, we won't speculate, but that sounds like a very fun conversation for another time. So, okay, well, we'll wrap up. I just want to say thank you again. It's been a warm and wonderful evening with you both. And I look forward to the time when the stars align and I get to meet you in person. You are a credit to the profession and to recovery and to just the organizations that you represent and are part of. So thank you for being here. And any last words you want to say before we go?
Tell the truth, be brave, love yourself.
Beautiful.
You are worthy of love.
Thank you. I love those affirmations. I'm receiving them right now. And to our viewers, if you're watching on Facebook, thank you for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, you are welcome to subscribe. You can click the little bell to be notified of other episodes. And so my good night is somewhat similar. May you feel loved, may you feel cherished, and may you love and cherish others. Thank you, Sharon and James, for being with us. And best wishes.
Thank you so much, Stacey.
Yay.
It's fantastic.
All right. Best wishes, and we'll be in touch.
Okay.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.